Now Snowball will read RISLAV the Righteous. Why not? RISLAV the Righteous by Sinjin. Like all true heroes, RISLAV Larch had inauspicious beginnings. We are told by chroniclers that the springtide night in the 448th year of the first era on which he was born was unseasonably cold, and his mother, Queen Lenaida, died very shortly after setting eyes upon her son. If he were much beloved of his father, King Morris of Skingrad, who already had plenty of heirs, 3 sons and 4 daughters before him, the chroniclers make no mention of it. His existence was so very indistinguished that we hear virtually nothing of him for the first 20 years of his life. His schooling, we can suppose, was similar to that of any spare prince in the Calovian West, with elite tutors to teach him the ways of hunting and battle. Etiquette, religious instruction, and even basic statecraft were seldom a part of the training of a prince of the Highlands, as it was in more civilized valley of Nibene. There is a brief reference to him, together with his family, as part of the rolls of honor during the coronation of the Emperor Gorius on the 23rd of Sundawn 1E 461. The ceremony, of course, held during the time of the Elysian doctrines of Maruka, and so was without entertainment, but the 13-year-old RISLAV was still witness to some of the greatest figures of legend. The Beast of Iniquia, Darlock Bray, represented his kingdom, giving honor to the Empire. The chieftain of Skyrim, Kejoric the White, and his son Hogue were in attendance, and despite the Empire's intolerance of all elves, Chimer Indril, Nevar, and Dwimmer Dunmac Dwarf King were evidently there as well, diplomatically representing Resdian, all in relative peace. Also mentioned on the rolls was a young Mer in service to the imperial court of High Rock, who was to have a great history with RISLAV Ryanin Dirini. Whether the 2 young men of about the same age met and conversed is entirely the stuff of historians' fancy. Ryan is spoken of in praising words as a powerful landowner, eventually buying the island of Bafria in the Iliac Bay and gradually conquering all of High Rock and large parts of Hammerfell and Skyrim. But RISLAV is not heard of again in history's books for another 17 years. We can only offer suspicion based on the facts that follow. Children of kings are, of course, married to children of other kings to bind alliances. The kingdoms of Skingrad and Kavach skirmished over common territory throughout the 5th century, until they reached a peace in the year 472. The details of this accord are not recorded, but since we know that Prince RISLAV was in the court of Kavach 6 years later as husband to Beline, the daughter of King Justinius, it is fair to make an educated guess that they were married then to make peace. This brings us to the year 478, when the Great Plague swept through all of Cyrodiil and seemed particularly concentrated in the independent Calovian West. Among the victims were King Morris and the rest of the entire royal family in Skingrad. RISLAV's only surviving elder brother, Dorald, survived, being in the imperial city as a priest of Maruka. He returned to his homeland to assume the throne. Of Dorald we have some history. The king's second son, he was slightly simple-minded and evidently very pious, All the chroniclers spoke of his sweetness and decency, how he saw a vision in his early years that brought him within with his father's blessing. From Skingrod to the imperial city and the priesthood of Maruka, of course, saw no difference between spiritual and political matters. It was the religion of the Elysian Empire, and it taught that to resist the Emperor was to resist the gods. Given that it is scarcely a surprise what Doral did when he became king of the independent kingdom of Skingrod, his first edict on the very first day was to secede the kingdom to the Empire. The reaction throughout the Colovian estates was shock and outrage. Nowhere more so than in the court of Kavach. RISLAV Larich, we are told, rode forth to his brother's kingdom, together with his wife and 24 of his father-in-law's cavalry. It was surely not an impressive army, no matter how the chroniclers embellish it. But they had little trouble defeating all the guards Dorald sent to stop them. In truth, there was no actual battling, for the soldiers of Skingrod resented their new king's decision to give up their autonomy. The brothers faced one another in the castle courtyard where they had grown up. In typical Colovian fashion, there was no trial, no accusations of treason, no jury, no judge, only an executioner. "Thou art no brother of mine," RISLAV Larich said, and struck Doral's head from his shoulders in one blow. He was crowned king of Skingrod, still holding the same bloody axe in his arms. If King RISLAV had no battle experience beforehand, that was shortly to change. Word spread quickly to the imperial city that Skingrod was once offered was now being taken back. Gorius was an accomplished warrior even before taking the throne, and 17 years he had as emperor were scarcely peaceful. Only 8 months before Dorald's assassination and Rislav's ascendancy, Gorius and the Elysian army had faced another of his coronation guests, Korjik the White. On the fields of the frozen north, the high chieftain of Skyrim lost his life in the Battle of Sungard. While the Pact of Chieftains was selecting a new leader, Cyrodiil was busy grabbing back the land of southern Skyrim that it had lost. In short, Emperor Gorius knew how to deal with the rebellious vassals. The Elysian army poured westward, like a flood of death, to borrow the chronicler's phrase, in numbers far exceeding what would be required to conquer Skingrod. Gorius could not have thought actual battle was likely. RISLAV, as we said, had little to no experience at warfare, and only a few days' practice at kingcraft. His kingdom and all of the Colovian West had just been ravaged by plague. The Elysians anticipated that a mere show of arms and a surrender. RISLAV instead prepared for battle. He quickly inspected his troops and drew up plans. The chroniclers who had heretofore ignored the life of RISLAV now devote verse after verse describing the king's aspect with fetishistic delight. While it may lack literary merit and taste, we are at least given some details of, at last, not surprisingly, the king wore the finest armor of his era, as the Colovian estates then had the finest leathersmiths. The only type of armor available in all of Tamriel, the king's Kilbanian mail, boiled and waxed for hardness, and studded with inch-long spikes with a rich chestnut red, and he wore it over his black tunic but under his black cloak. The statue of RISLAV the Righteous, which now stands in Skingrad, is a romanticized version of King, but not inaccurate, except in the armor represented. No bard of the Colovian West would have gone to the market so lightly protected, but it does, as we will see, include the most important accoutrements of RISLAV, his trained hawk and his fast horse. The winter rains had washed through the roads to the south, sending much of the west welled spilling into Valenwood. The Emperor took the northern route, and King RISLAV with a small patrol of guards met him at a low pass on what is now the Gold Road. The Emperor's army, it is said, was so large that the beast of Aniquia could hear its march from hundreds of miles away, and despite himself, the chroniclers say he quaked in fear. RISLAV, it was said, did not quake. With perfect politeness, he was told the Emperor that his party was too large to be accommodated in the tiny kingdom of Skingrad. Next time, RISLAV said, write before you come. The Emperor was, like most Elysian emperors, not a man of great humor, and he thought RISLAV touched by Sheograth. He ordered his personal guards to arrest the poor madman, but at that moment the king of Skingrad raised his arm and sent his hawk flying into the sky. It was a signal his army had been waiting for. The Elysians were all within the pass and the range of their arrows. King RISLAV and his guard began riding westward as fast as if they had been kissed by wild Kinnereth. As the chronicler said, he did not dare to look behind him, but his plan went faultlessly. The far eastern end of the pass was sealed by rolling boulders, giving the Elysian no direction to go but westward. The Skingrad archer rained arrows down upon the Imperial army from far above on the plateaus, remaining safe from reprisal. The furious Emperor Gorius chased RISLAV from the Weald to the highlands, leaving Skingrad far behind. All the while his army growing steadily smaller and smaller. In the ancient highland forests, the Imperial army met the army of RISLAV's father-in-law, the King of Kavich. The Elysian army likely still outnumbered their opponents, but they were exhausted, their morale had been obliterated by the chase amid a sea of arrows. After an hour's battle, they retreated north into what is now Imperial Reserve, and from there further north and east to slip back to nurse their wounds and pride in Nabine. It was the beginning of the end of the Elysian hegemony. The kings of the Colovian West joined with Kavach and Skingrad to resist imperial incursion. The clan Durini under Ryan was inspired to outlaw the religion of the Elysian Reform throughout his lands in High Rock, and began pushing into imperial territories. The new High Chief of Skyrim, Hogue, now called Hogue Murkiller, though sharing the Emperor's official xenophobia, also joined the resistance. His heir, King Ysmir Wolfhearth of Atmora, helped continue the struggle upon Hogue's death in battle, and also ensured his place in history. The heroic king of Skingrad, who faced the Emperor's army virtually alone and triggered its end, justly deserves his sobriquet of RISLAV the Righteous. And that was RISLAV the Righteous. Have a good day. Bye-bye.